and the other meeting materials to the project website. Let's see, can you go to the next slide, Aubrey? So on our agenda tonight, we will start with a project update and recap our community survey feedback. We will also get to our main topic and hear some information from our construction manager on our filtration facility. And we'll also leave some time at the end of the meeting to discuss your ideas and input. And we're especially looking forward to ideas about the site advisory group and the project communications as we move forward. For those of you who are new to Zoom, we can go to the next slide. You can see the toolbar down at the bottom of your screen, and we ask that you keep your mic on mute and your webcam off unless you're speaking. If you have ideas to share, please use your hand tool or type into the chat. Our presenters will pause along the way to invite input. And as suggested in our last meeting, we are going to skip the introduction and the friendly banter and just move right into the project update with David Peters. So if you want to go into the next slide.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We appreciate having you here again this month. Hope you're all hunkering down and ready for the snow. It looks like the east side might be getting some of that. I'm just getting lots of sleet out here in Tualatin, but hopefully all is well where you're at. We're excited to be here tonight. We have our construction management group with us to talk a little bit about construction and what we might expect during construction for the filtration facility. And so we're looking forward to having them and getting them introduced tonight. But before we get there, I have just a couple slides on some updates on activities that have been going on over the last, well, I guess the past month, because you heard me last. So the biggest one is the first bullet here. Biggest for the project team is that we closed on our loan with the Environmental Protection Agency. That's the WIFIA loan, which is the Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act. And so that will help lower rates for this project. And so that's a big deal for us. And as we mentioned last month, we'll come back in March and we'll talk about the details of that loan, and we'll also talk about the updated costs for the facilities. Because we have been continuing through our basis of design, which is the last bullet on this slide. And we putting together costs for what that facility would look like. And so we'll bring all that together and talk about that with you next month. We have started construction over at the corrosion control facility at our Lusted Hill site. And so that's underway, and I know they've been doing some excavation and starting the main construction there. So we're excited to see that happen. And then last month Ken was here and he talked a little bit about the fact that we have our pipeline designers on board now, and their first activity is going to be to get out and start doing some geotechnical investigations along the roads and in our easements. And so that work will be starting in March and we'll go through March, April. Now, last month when Ken was here, we were hoping that was going to get started in February, but that has been moved back about a month. And so that'll be starting in March and April. And as they discussed, that will impact traffic. And we took your advice from last month, and we'll get some reader boards installed out there. I believe they plan to do that here at the end of this month, to have those installed a couple of weeks before they actually start the work out there in your area. So that's upcoming activities in the next few weeks. And then the next step we have listed here is the beginning of the selection for the pipeline contractor. So we have one more contract to fill, and that is the group that will be actually installing the raw water and finished water lines. And so we will be releasing a request for proposals from teams that are interested in doing that work. And we hope to have that out about mid-March. And then we'll probably get proposals in mid-April. And that selection will take place over the summer. So that process has started. We should have that group on board towards the end of the calendar year this year. So those are some of the bigger activities that have been happening this past month. Next slide. And we, after last month, we did a survey, and we're working to get some feedback on some of the events that our architects had put together. And so we wanted to share a little bit of that feedback here tonight. This is feedback that our architects will take and incorporate as they go forward and get started on the actual design. And so one of those questions was what you thought about how the non-process buildings looked. And this, for example, was a rendering of what the administration building for a site could potentially look like. And looks like we had 7 results there. And so a little over half thought it looked good. A little under half said there was something like to see changed or added. And then these were some of the comments we received. You know, some really like the abundance of windows, like that look of the facility. Second bullet here, I don't know if this was one of you that wrote it, but my boss told me the same thing, that we don't want to pay big money to design something that's large and beautiful. It's not we really want to work on building a structure that's functional. And so that's been brought up in a number of meetings I've been in. And then incorporating more rural feel if possible. So it sounds like some folks may think looks a little not quite as agrarian or rural as might be possible. So those are our thoughts and comments we'll take back. There was also one more slide that looked at the process buildings, and we had a more of a reaction, or I'll say negative reaction to this one, where 5 of the 7 would like to see something changed. And it looked like those comments were around making sure everything was kept within the height limits, and looking at, well, associated with the height, trying to find ways to keep the height to a minimum by looking at things like maybe partially bearing structures or tanks and things like that. So again, things that we'll pass along to our architects for them to take into account as they start thinking about how to design these facilities. So at this point then, that's the end of my portion of the presentation. And at this point, I will pass things to John Johnson with the Portland Water Bureau, and he'll get our construction team introduced.
Thanks, David. And thanks everybody for coming tonight and attending the group session here. And most of you, or hopefully most of you guys have been introduced to me before, but I'm John Johnson with the Portland Water Bureau, and I'm going to be the construction manager representative for the Water Bureau, who's going to work with a team of contractors who's going to actually build a facility. So right now I'm the construction manager for the corrosion control facility, and we're working with MWH constructors on that project. And we're also going to work with MWH and a joint venture of Kiewit on the facility. We selected MWH and Kiewit here sometime last year to be the CMGC, the construction manager and general contractor for the filtration facility construction. And we're entering into a contract currently for pre-construction services. And that pre-construction services stage will last for about 2 years. And the team will help us provide insight by providing insight into construction practices and estimating and a lot of different aspects of contractor expertise on the input of the design. So with that, I'd like to go and introduce the team of MWH and Kiewit, starting with their construction manager, which is John Kolkman.
Yeah, thanks, John. As John said, welcome everyone. My name is John Kolkman, and will be the project manager for the construction phase of the project. Just a little bit about myself and about what we do. MWH Kiewit joint venture, both entities have got a lot of experience building these large, complex municipal treatment plants. For myself, I've been working for MWH for the last 23 years, I think now, and have done a lot of these different facilities throughout the country and overseas, as you may have picked up, not originally from the US. But we're really looking forward to being able to sort of bring our experience to the construction of this project. Because of that background that we have in municipal construction, I think we're very well suited to be able to provide an excellent facility for the Water Bureau. Probably enough about me. With that said, I'll introduce you to Michael.
Thanks, John Kolkman. Michael Harmon here. I'm the project executive. I've been with MWH now going on 13 years. As John mentioned, the MWH Kiewit joint venture, we go back quite a ways. In fact, some team members that are on this team, I go back to the 13 years I've been with MWH of us working together and delivering complicated projects. I think in the last 10 years between the two companies, we've delivered about $6 billion of water and wastewater treatment plants of this nature. With that, I'll toss the baton over to Ben.
Hello, everyone. As Michael mentioned, my name is Ben McGathy. I'm the pre-construction manager for the.
Hey, Ben, we're having a hard time hearing you, Ben.
There's always somebody, right, that doesn't know how to use the microphone. Had to be me. Hello, everyone. As Michael mentioned, I'm Ben McGathy. I'm the pre-construction manager for the MWH Kiewit JV. I've spent my entire career planning and building facilities very similar to the Bull Run filtration facility. And I guess I'd just say I'm very excited to be here, be part of the team, and I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you. I will turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, I'm Jim Studer. I come from the Kiewit side of the MWH Kiewit joint venture. I've worked for Kiewit for over 20 years, like the rest of the group, working on primarily water, wastewater treatment facilities around the Western US. And I'm currently leading the estimate for Kiewit's side on the pre-construction, and I'm also happy to be part of the team.
All righty, thanks everybody. So I'd just like to point out that the people we just introduced you to, or to introduce themselves, are tied to the project, as am I. So we are going to shepherd this project through the pre-construction services, and we're going to listen to the input that you guys have. We're going to incorporate as much of that as we possibly can, and then we're going to take this project into construction, understanding the expectations and moving forward with those. So with that, can we get the next slide? So Aubrey and others have passed these questions on to us that you guys have presented to them, and I've passed them on to the construction team for input. And some of those top questions that you guys have asked are: how long will construction last? What types of construction will happen when? What will be noticed during the day and at night? And how will the site be accessed during construction? When will we know more? And what will you do to keep roads safe and in good shape? Also, what will you do to manage noise and dust during construction? What I'd like to say here is that we understand that you have these questions, and we understand that these are the big impacts that you guys see potentially coming your way. And unfortunately, construction's out a couple more years yet, and a lot of these aspects haven't been defined, and some of them build on each other. One of the big questions a lot of folks ask is: how will the site be accessed during construction? I know we have a lot of concern about where and how we're going to get onto the site and leave the site. And to be honest with you, we're still developing those concepts and where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. As we all know, the site is fairly remote and the access routes are fairly limited. So we are limited in how we're going to get to the site and how we're going to leave the site. But we're looking at those and evaluating those and trying to determine how we can best use those, always keeping in mind the impacts of you, the people that live in the area. How long will construction last? Construction, the duration, it's going to last probably starting around late 2003 or 23, and then continuing on into our compliance deadline of late 2027. Right now we're in pre-construction and we're also in design. So the construction team is going to work hand in hand with the design team throughout the design process to help maximize the design efficiency, get contractor input early in the process so that we can incorporate those things and keep moving forward. Obviously, we're going to have ongoing community conversations with you and with others. We're going to be coordinating the facility design and with getting contractor input on construction to the designers so we can best incorporate that. We're going to continue to evaluate traffic and site access considerations, as I said a moment ago. Coordinating with the pipeline design and contractor. You guys heard a minute ago that we're in the selection process for that contractor, and we understand that we're going to have a lot of folks working in the same areas, and coordination between the facilities contractor and the pipeline contractor are going to be important, both with access and construction and et cetera. So we recognize that as being a high point that we need to focus on. During construction, obviously, we're going to continue communicating with the public. I am a face that most of you guys have seen prior, and I'll be a face that you will continue to see. And those of you that have gotten to know me a little bit, I think you understand that I'm pretty open and obviously welcome conversations with you. I want to hear from you to see how things are going and see what we can do better. The contractor obviously always has a safety first philosophy: safety for them, safety for you, safety for the project. We will be developing a construction management plan as we go through this pre-construction phase. And we're going to take the input that you guys give us through this process and try to incorporate it as best we can. We can't wave a magic wand and make all of the noise and all of the impacts go away, but we're going to listen and we're going to do what we can to address your concerns. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to John. And he's going to go over a few of these slides more particularly.
Yeah, thanks, John. And as John had indicated in the previous slide, safety is a very important component for any construction project, and it's a major focus of all of our projects and what we do. But safety doesn't just confine itself to the project construction. It also affects the local areas. It affects people that are living nearby, residents, etc. So it's more than just safety for the construction activities, but safety for everyone. So how do we try and mitigate some of that? We have very site-specific safety protocols, as I've indicated there, that control sort of access to the site. We want to make sure that the access in and out of the site, regardless of how that turns out to be located, that it's well managed and that we're keeping access in and out in a safe manner. We want to make sure, for instance, that the site would be secured. I mean, it's quite a large construction site in that location, but typically for these type of projects, we would have the perimeter of the site fenced. And then additionally, gate security with the compound where the administration part and the management side of things sits also separately fenced as well. This helps with controlling the site during the day, at night, managing access in and out, but also discouraging any unwanted access onto the site, but also protecting against just inadvertent access to the site for pets, for children, people that are interested in having a look at things, for livestock, all of those things. So we've got to try and manage everything regarding that. Another part of the safety on the site is obviously speed limits, and that extends out beyond just the site boundaries itself, but out to the roads, and how do we get to the main roads through the community areas. And so those are things that are really emphasized a lot right through the construction period. Next slide, please. So what will we notice? Well, obviously one of the questions that's probably at the forefront of people's minds is, what can we expect? And at the end of the day, this is a large municipal treatment plant construction project. As John had outlined, the construction period goes for quite a long period of time, sort of the 4-year plus range. And the construction sort of activities vary within that time frame. We don't have a lot of detail on what exactly we're going to be building, because obviously the design is still under development. But in general, for this type of plant, we're going to have construction equipment on site. There's going to be, excavation, there's going to be trucks, there's going to be drill rigs for piling, and then later on doing concrete activities, etc. So there will be changes to the construction activities through the course of that period. We will have to have, obviously, deliveries of equipment and materials to site. And so we have to manage those to be as unobtrusive as we possibly can through the course of the day. For the construction, for these type of construction projects, we would typically try and keep the work activities down to a 5-day week. There will be times where Saturdays will be utilized for construction activities, but in general, Sundays would always be a day that construction activities would not occur. And typically for most of these projects, we would also look to try and restrict construction activities through holiday periods as well, like having the whole 4-day break over Thanksgiving weekend, those sort of things. So we can sort of try and minimize disruption to the neighbors during those holiday timeframes. But at the end of the day, we've got a long construction period. It varies in time and seasons. Obviously, some of the concerns in winter are different than they are in summer, as people are probably experiencing there. It sounds like it's snowing at the moment. In the middle of summer, the snow is not so much of an issue. Snow and rain in the winter season are obviously going to cause issues with potentially tracking mud out onto the roads. In summer, it's more restricted to sort of like dust control on the site and different challenges that we have through the different seasons. And with that, you've got daylight hours that vary as well. So work start times can be variable between winter and summer, where we have longer work hours. Because we don't really want to have people coming into the site too early when it's still dark, and that causes potentially some issues as well. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned just before, throughout the course of that construction period, the type of construction work is definitely going to move with the normal progression of the project. When we start the construction phase, that initial work is going to be primarily related to earthwork and excavation work, soil improvements, foundations, that sort of thing, potentially some drilled piles just for foundations on structures, but all of that work typically at ground level. Following that, typically we're going to run into concrete activities. That's the next major activity after we've done the earthwork. And the concrete activities are going to be extensive. At the end of the day, a lot of the tanks that hold the water and have the treatment processes in them are going to be made of concrete. And so there'll be large quantities of that concrete made.
Okay, John, I just want to pause you for a moment. We had a question from someone in the audience. They wanted to know how long would summer season construction hours be?
Once again, it is a little dependent. I mean, typically for the summer season, you know, we would like to probably start work activities when the daylight hours are long. You know, you'd be looking at a 6:30 or 7 o'clock start would be typical. I'm not saying that's going to necessarily be exactly what we do here, but that would be a typical time frame. And then like a finishing time would be somewhere any time between sort of like 3:30 p.m. through to 5 p.m. as a normal work day during the summer, and sort of slightly shorter hours during winter when the daylight hours obviously are reduced.
Thanks.
So, you know, and so as a result of that, oh, sorry, I'll just continue, just lost my train of thought there. After the concrete, then obviously we've had a lot of equipment that has to go in to do the water treatment that goes inside the building. So typically you won't really see the equipment as such. The mechanical and electrical activities are included in that. And then sort of following on more towards the end of the construction period, then we get into sort of commissioning and startup of the new facilities and starting to involve the operations staff and getting them trained up for the long-term running of the facility. And that's sort of some of the work activities that span that construction period. Next slide.
I just will pause you again really quick here, just because that person also responded that 6:30 is an early time for residential homes, and we do recognize that, but there is going to be some give and take. You know, there's a time frame that we need to get this project completed, and if we're not getting started that early in the morning, then that puts time out further into our process. I don't know if you had anything to add about that, John, but I just wanted to acknowledge that comment was made.
Yep, no, that's probably not too much more that we need to say about that just at the moment. Yeah. So yeah, once again, the construction activities is typically, as I indicated in the previous slide, where we start off primarily with an earthwork sort of activity and then going into concrete. Those first two activities, which are, you know, are going to take the first, you know, 1.5 to 2 years of the construction project, typically the heaviest portions of the construction. And in those areas, we will definitely have larger numbers of people on site to perform those activities. The concrete work is quite a high workforce period. But the thing here is that in addition, you know, here I am, I'm talking about the construction activities that are still a couple of years out. And so the fact that we've been brought on early in the process allows us to sort of start trying to plan those things. As the design develops, we can look at what the schedule looks like. So to sort of circle back to the previous comment relating to the start times being early, once we get a better feel for what the design really entails, then we can look at obviously sequencing and scheduling that and resource loading the schedule to get an idea of what those manpower curves look like. And then, you know, what sort of work hours we are going to be looking at during the weeks to be able to get the work done within the time frame that the Water Bureau has. And there's a number of activities through here, but as you can see, as we get into the mechanical and electrical, architectural concerns, and then, as I said, going into the commissioning and startup activities, the workforce starts to taper off towards the end of the construction work. So next slide. So as I said before, the Bureau have passed on to us already some of the community input that they've received from local community. And so these are all, once again, things that we can sort of take into account as we're trying to plan the construction work through this pre-construction period before we actually get into construction. So there's a real benefit to having the ability to have the dialogue, not just with the Water Bureau and the designers, but also with the construction company that's going to be building this prior to construction even starting. It really does lend itself well to community involvement and being able to try and address or minimize some of the concerns that are raised. Also, just sort of try and make sure that everyone is on board with what the expectations are for the construction work as we start that phase. Next slide, please. And then, potential strategies to keep traffic moving. There's a lot of factors that come into this. I mean, every project that we do has its own differences and its own particular challenges, and this project is going to be no different from that. At the end of the day, as John had said previously, there's limited roads in and out of the plant, and we have to share the roads. I mean, we've got to share the roads with the residents. There's horticultural traffic in the area, resident traffic, there's school buses, there's all of those things at certain times of days that we have to be mindful of and try and manage some of the work to sort of accommodate what the local traffic conditions are as well. And we have a lot of different activities going on. I mean, the first activities as far as earthwork go, there is a lot of exporting of material. There's trucking off of material that appears to be needed. Once again, we don't have all of the details from the design as yet, and we're still looking at that, but initially that's there's going to be that normal sort of traffic to be able to manage. We're going to try and make sure that we economize the trips as much as we can with trucks going out with exported dirt. Don't have them come back empty. We'll try and bring them back with other material to reduce the number of round trips. Some of the other strategies that we're looking into are potentially having an on-site concrete batch plant. So rather than if we have a large concrete placement in a certain day of having concrete trucks coming in and out of the site for a prolonged period of time, we would be able to batch our own concrete on site and have the deliveries of aggregate and cement staged at certain or delivered at certain times of the day to minimize impact on the local roads, rather than having to have concrete trucks coming in from 6:30 in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A couple of the other things that we've looked into that we've used successfully on previous projects is where we have large numbers of construction activities, we can also have large numbers of workers that are going to be involved with the project. And rather than having, say, 200 or 300 individual workers coming in their cars, we can have an off-site parking area and then shuttle people on buses onto the site. Of course, if you do that, then people can't sort of get off-site at lunchtime to go and get food. So we'd also, sometimes we'll bring in, restaurant trucks that can come in from local restaurants, food trucks, that sort of thing, to provide lunches and everything else for the workers. Those are just some of the strategies that we've used on previous projects. As I said, some of those things are not necessarily defined at this early stage, but they're items that we have used successfully previously. Did I question?
Just pause, for a minute here. So the timing questions, the person had also mentioned that if you are ending at 3 p.m. in the summer, then why start so early? And I think you probably addressed that with different process. There may be different situations for, it's not something that's going to happen every day. There will be different start times and different end times throughout the process. And I just want to point out too, that John is giving examples of projects that he's worked on. We still don't have a design finalized yet, which means that we don't have the beginnings of a construction plan even happening yet. So I just want to point that out. But the Pat and Dean had mentioned that they like the idea of batching concrete on site. And Patricia had a question, will the concrete batch plant create more noise?
So the concrete batch plant does create noise. At the end of the day, a lot of the construction traffic that we have is going to be to have some noise associated with trucks and excavators and that sort of thing. And so the batch plant with the mills and the conveyors does create some noise, but I think it probably mitigates some of the impact on having trucks running up and down the road. You know, some of these concrete placements are really large. And to answer one of the other questions, yes, that's sometimes why we have to start a concrete placement early in the day so that we can get all of the concrete placed and then finished, and try and avoid going late into the night to get that work done. But that means concrete truck traffic coming in and out. You know, there may be concrete placements that are 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 cubic yards. And a concrete truck at 9.5 to 10 yards per truck, you can imagine that that's a lot of traffic. So the impact from the batch plant, I think, would be less invasive than potentially the traffic caused.
Right, we got another comment or question. Any idea of the total number of heavy truck trips to and from the site over the life of the project? I would guess that the total wear and tear of the roads will be significant. Will Portland pay Multnomah County to repair or pave the sections of the roads near the plant? That may be a better question for, I mean, there's a couple questions there. So, but I don't know if David, if you wanted to chime in on that as well, because I think you have some ideas on that.
Well, I'll try to chime in. I mean, these are topics that will be out as we go through the design. The total number of truck trips, now that we are better understanding the design and we have the contractors on board, those are the types of things that we can look at earnestly now. Our designers will be looking at excavation quantities and concrete quantities, and we'll be able to evaluate what that turns into truck trips. So we have the team members now that'll help us do that, those types of things in the not too distant future. And in terms of the wear and tear on roads and what we'll need to do with the county, we will be meeting with the county to work out those details. You know, I'll say I'll call it an advantage, for lack of a better word right now, is, you know, certainly the roads that we're going to be putting pipelines in, there are roads that we will be repaving going forward. So some of that will get taken care of as we're coordinating between the pipelines and the filtration facility. But certainly during the course of construction, there will also be some requirements for us to keep roads well maintained for traffic. And so we'll be talking to both Multnomah and Clackamas County to better understand what those requirements will be as we go forward. I see, it looks like John Johnson has some things to add in my answer.
Yeah, David, thanks. I was just going to add a couple little points with that. And we understand what you guys' concerns are with truck traffic and the number of trips. But something to keep in mind also from our perspective is that export is very expensive. And the more import that we do is also very expensive. So from an owner's perspective, we're looking to minimize those truck trips in and out as much as we can. So your concern is also the same as our concern as far as minimizing those truck trips. And we're going to try to keep those to a minimum if possible, as much as possible.
Thanks, John. Dave, Pat says that Carpenter Lane is already falling apart to the traffic. Sorry, there's it's a little bit stormy here. Carpenter Lane is already falling apart from extra traffic. Patricia wants to know, does anyone know of a road out there that isn't in bad repair? Will the roads be repaired before trucks start rolling? Do either of you have, or John, have a answer to that? Oh, you're on mute.
Just got to find my unmute button. I really don't have an answer yet. I think, again, those will be things that we'll look at in detail as we go forward. So we'll need to evaluate that, and like I say, we will need to just like residential cars. I mean, trucks don't like heavily potholed roads and things like that either. So those are things that we will need to take a look at and figure out how we can what we could do to keep them in a good condition going forward and throughout the construction. But we'll,
Right.
yeah, so we'll be looking at those details.
Dean and Pat are asking, when will we know the location of all the access roads going in and out of the construction site?
So we were just talking to designers about that today, that we'd like to get a plan from them answering that question specifically. So I will need to get a little bit of time from them to get that figured out so that I can give an answer to you for that question. I bet there are some things that we need to do in advance. That we need to get out and talk to the counties, the transportation departments, and understand what the requirements are for coming into those roads and the types of roads and intersections, the requirements that they might have. So it may be, I want to say it may be this summer before we get a definitive answer on where those accesses will be. But
That will be happening sooner than you know. Summer is coming up fast.
And we shared with them today that that's probably the main question we haven't been able to answer for you yet, that is high on our agenda to get answered. So if we have that sooner than this summer, we will certainly bring that and share that information.
Right, that's the last of our questions for now. John, do you want to keep moving on here?
Yeah, I think if we can pop to the next slide. Probably a good segue from talking about the roads. You know, one of the things that we are always focused on with regards to the construction projects that we do is how to keep the roads clean. You know, at the end of the day, we have talked about the haul off and the import of material, and that is truck traffic, and we want to make sure that we're not tracking material out onto the roads, but also keeping the roads clean. You know, there's a few strategies obviously that we have there with regards to road maintenance and providing wheel washers and undercarriage washers to keep the roads clean as the trucks are leaving the site. You know, another strategy typically that we've used successfully on a lot of other projects is making sure that we have the initial entrance into the plant actually paved early on in the process, and that allows trucks to get rid of any dust or debris and water from the truck washers on the paved road inside the plant before they get out onto the access roads. And then making sure that we're doing sort of sweeping and cleaning of the roads adjacent to the site where we've had any sort of specific impact on the condition of the road, and making sure those are kept in good condition, irrespective of the condition of the roads as they exist now, but making sure they are kept well maintained and cleaned as we're doing the construction work. So next slide. I think this is the final one. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about just the concept of what we do with working when we're in a situation where we are working next to neighbours. We've had some good success on other projects around the country on making sure that we do keep the community involved and informed on the construction activities as they're going on. You know, we have attended previously homeowners association meetings, community meetings, just to keep people in the loop. Posting door hangers is another one where we've gone around the neighborhoods to door knock and leave information brochures about the project, about upcoming events on the project, so people are aware of if we do have any special activities or activities that may sort of occur outside of those normal work hours. You know, we want to make sure that we are available and have hotline access for people that do have complaints or issues, or if they're seeing something that they don't think is normal, just to ask for information. You know, some of the other projects that we've done, we've had great success with having like setting up an information booth at one of the areas, the secure areas on the site, if we do have a large event going, and putting on, you know, coffee and donuts and that sort of thing, because the construction project is going to be a big part of the community for the course of, or the duration of the construction. And we want to make sure that we're sort of keeping everyone informed about what's going on. And maybe it's the engineering nerd in me, but I do find it's, you know, there are some interesting things that are going on as part of the construction work and what's happening on site, and some of the work that's going on that I'm sure some of the local community will be interested in seeing. And so those are some of the strategies that we have used successfully on previous projects, and I'm sure we can bring to this project as well, to make sure that we're listening to and understanding what the concerns are, but also providing information to the community as to what we are doing as part of the construction for the project. I think that's about all I had.
Right. Turn it over to Dan. Or did you have something, John? You wanted to chime in on anything?
Yeah, thanks, Benita. I just wanted to say that, you know, today we appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody about construction. And I understand that we may not have been able to provide a ton of concrete answers for you. But like I said earlier, the team that we put together is a very experienced in this type of construction. We selected them because they're able to work with us earlier on in the project and listen to the concerns and develop a plan that's going to be the best plan that we can put together for everybody. So I just wanted to say that, and thanks to the team for showing up tonight. Appreciate it.
Okay. Hi again, everybody. Dan Spiker. Before we go into a next question, as inferred by this slide, are there any other questions for the construction team that they can respond to or give some additional insight to? Of course, if you put something in the chat, we'll respond to them when appropriate, but I wanted to give the chance right now if anybody had another question to ask. If not, we are going to go on and talk about additional communications. And this is the time where if you want to show your video, and if you'd like to ask a question or put a question in the chat, I'm going to ask a few things about communications going forward with this effort and get your reactions to them. One thing to recall is that we only have 2 more scheduled stakeholder advisory group meetings for the coming few months. There's one scheduled in March to talk through costs and rates. And of course, there's one scheduled for April to enter some more details as appropriate for design. And there are no additional scheduled meetings beyond that point. So one of the questions to ask this team is, would you like to see and hear and be involved in more communications, especially as design gets more legs and gets more detail? And would you maybe at a minimum want at least a couple more sessions over the course of the spring, so maybe a May and June timeframe, so that we can bring some conclusion to this good neighbor agreement, the language that we would be putting on and with you to reflect a number of things we've been talking about over the past year plus. Let's get a reaction to that. What's your take on having at least 2 more sessions in May and June of this year with the Stakeholder Advisory Group?
Looks like Jane has her hand raised. Jane?
Hey there. Rough draft. Hasn't been there one posted, shared, written rough draft so that people could review it. As much as we have the Lake Oswego document that we can, you know, compare it to, and then compare it to our own particular, you know, ins and outs for this particular project, because it is very much unlike the Lake Oswego project. My assumption, right or wrong, is that in contacting John, Michael, Ben, or Jim, I can use the Bull Run Filtration at mwhconstructors.com for communications. Yes or no, I can get that from Benita later. And most definitely would like to have more sessions. Thank you. Enough
Excellent.
said.
Very good. Okay. Bonita, let's answer her second question about getting contact. You're still the main contact point, right, Bonita? And you can then
Yes,
provide
that's right.
reference to, okay,
Yes.
great.
That's true.
Great. Okay. And in terms of documentation, yes, the intention is to continue with the actual document. We have shared draft language in these sessions in the past, and the intention was to get to that final documentation in April, which we can still press for, but we thought it might be very appropriate to have at least a couple more sessions to gain your reflection and your ideas. It looks like Dean and Pat wrote a note, more sessions, especially regarding the good neighbor agreement. Okay, so how about this as a reaction? Let's have at least those couple more, and let's continue to beg the question at least a couple months in advance whether more beyond what are planned are appropriate. So we'll ask in May whether you'd like to have more in July and August, and so on. Because as we get more information about design in particular, some more specifics might be appropriate to share with this team. Beyond that good neighbor agreement, my second question is, obviously things are still going to be going on with this project, more design, and you heard from the construction group today, certainly construction starting in a number of years from now. At a minimum, would it be appropriate to have quarterly interactions in some way, not just emails and information on the website, but also connections in a forum like this, whether it be a live, hopefully we'll be able to meet live again sometime in the future, and or in a virtual setting like this? What's your reaction to maybe having quarterly interactions starting end of summer and going into the fall and beyond?
Before we get there, I just want to acknowledge that Daniel had said yes, additional meetings, especially concerning cost and finances. And the next meeting that we have in March, we will have our finance manager at that meeting to talk about exactly that.
Good. So reactions to continuing these conversations in some way, shape, or form beyond summer, maybe on a quarterly basis? Anybody with reactions or thumbs up? Yes, says Jane. Okay. Yes, says Dean and Pat. Excellent. Okay.
This is Mike Cowan. I say yes also.
Please, thank you, Mike. Excellent. Great. That's good to hear. Certainly good information can be shared during additional sessions. Okay. And we'll continue to ask, right? Does this make sense? Is this effective? Are they providing the details you want, at least as what we can provide? Question in here from Daniel also about need more discussions about stormwater plan. Okay, that's definitely outside of my technical bailiwick. And I would assume, Dave Peters, that that's something that would be part of the design component, and when that would be available we could bring that information to light to this team. Okay, fine with more meetings coming from Patricia. Great.
Correct.
Okay,
Stormwater.
thank you, Dave, for that clarification. Okay, any other questions about communications? Thoughts about communications? Continued interactions or engagement? Dean and
I
Pat.
see that there's a comment about having the in-person meetings, and we would like to have that as well. Right now, we're just not in the position to be able to do that, but we can certainly, once we get the clearance to do that, hopefully, with the vaccine and some progress being made on the COVID situation, hopefully by the end of the year, we can be in that position.
Yeah, very good. Okay. There's a question that just came up about CMGC can send traffic workers special construction events sent to PWB and share with email to neighborhood. Bonita, does that make sense in terms of the connection with interaction and sharing of information and using the email chain to provide information to this stakeholder advisory group and beyond?
We do have a web page that has construction activity on it that we will be updating. Special construction events sent to PWB. Do you want to share more what you mean by that, Jane?
Sorry, I had to find the right button. When pilings go into effect for the construction, when they have to anchor the areas that they're going to be pouring concrete, it would be nice to know that, okay, 2 weeks from today, we will begin doing pilings from this hour to this hour. Because if school is in session, they probably would like to have a little advanced knowledge so that if, kids ask, granted, there's only a couple hundred kids that attend Cottrell, but a piling the noise travels quite a long distance. And if you were having, like you said, the concrete batch site in effect, and it's going to last the month of June and July, or July and August, or even 3 months, it would be nice that neighbors would know advance notice for not only the construction part of it, but if you're working on the pipeline at the same time, just a heads up. Granted, the reader boards are going to be there, but you're going to read the reader boards if the communication has been given in advance. And generally, my experience with construction sites is that they're pretty fluid, but you know that within a 1 or 2 week, period about when you're proposing to start a next phase or the addition of a phase, and that's where it would come in handy for neighbors to, be prepared of a new or different noise and or a new or different traffic route. That's all.
Yes, and so one of the thoughts that we had was that we would be able to provide weekly updates through email, through our e-newsletter, and then keeping our website updated daily on what sort of construction activity is happening at the site. We started that with this pipeline activity that's coming up. If you visit our construction activity page, you'll find the information about when that is going to be starting, which is in a couple of weeks, and what sort of noise and traffic impacts will be coming with that. And then as we no more getting closer or going through that process over the month with the drilling, we'll update that information on the web page. Does that seem like something that's reasonable, or is there more that you would like to see?
What I'm thinking of is, if I'm going to plan a family reunion, COVID-19 permitting and all, I want to make sure that if I know in advance that, okay, they're going to be doing whatever. And I know there's going to be increased noise with some of these projects. I'd rather, have a birthday party, family reunion, whatever, planned on a time that they're not going to be involved in that activity probably. Okay, and not all events can be planned on a Sunday.
Absolutely. And make a valid point, and we will do what we can. Things change, I know, in construction projects on a daily basis, even despite best plans, but as soon as we know something, we can get that information out to the neighborhood. Looks like Aubrey's showing our page there.
All right, and Patricia put the last comment in the chat about we can wear masks and social distance. Yes, and once we have an appropriate thumbs up from the powers that be, from the health department and the city, that will certainly be one of our first things. We're all starved for human interaction and engagement. We know that doing this remotely is not as favorable as being together, and we look forward to doing it together again as soon as possible.
This is not a personal decision that we're making. This is what we have been asked to do to keep people safe. That's our priority of ours.
Right. Okay, with that.
David and Benita, I have a couple questions. Hopefully they're not going to take too long. One reason that I asked about financing and costs, even though I heard that that's going to be the subject of next month's meeting, is that I think that subject in particular is of concern to a much, much larger group of people than we have in our stakeholder group. And so I think it's going to be really important that when you have those discussions, that you do a pretty big outreach that goes way beyond our group here, because I think that's such an important issue, especially, what it's going to do to people's water bills in Portland and the other municipalities that participate in Bull Run, especially in the last year when we've seen Gresham and some other municipalities pull out of the agreement. It could be really, really big, and just the costs that have gone up since it was initially proposed to the city council. I think we're now talking, what is it, like $1 billion? I think that's big enough that we need to have a much bigger public forum to talk about the costs. The second thing is, David, offline we can talk, but I know our technical working group on Johnson Creek that you came and talked to a year and a half ago would be very interested in having you come back again and talk sometime, but we can talk about that later.
That sounds great. Thanks for sharing those comments. And we'd love to come back and talk again. And in regards to the cost, you are right. That is going to be a topic that has a larger audience. And we've been talking internally about we begin to get that message out now that we have the WIFIA financing and we're getting some starting to get some cost understanding as we get our design started. Those are things we're looking at for a broader release of that message. So those are good comments, and those are things that we are talking about internally, and Benita's certainly helping us with that also.
Thank you.
Okay, Benita, I'm going to turn it back over to you, but it looks like there's a question from Pat about the WIFIA loan.
Yes, the WIFIA loan percentage, I believe, is 1.89. Do you know, David, at the top of your head?
That is correct, 1.89.
I can only get my mortgage to be that low. Can you go to the next slide, Aubrey? So our next meeting is Thursday, March 11th, and that will be from the same time, 6 to 7:30. We'll be talking about project costs. We haven't really figured out the topic for our next for the April meeting, it may be the designers coming back. We're just trying to figure out where they're at and if they will have some good information to share. But we are still planning to have that meeting on April 8th, and that we may be just talking to getting a little bit more into that good neighbor agreement at that time. But if anybody has any other questions or any sort of thoughts that they want to share before we exit here, we save you 30 minutes of your evening. Take a look here. Any hands? Any comments? Dean and Pat say, enjoy the snow. We will. All right. Well, then if that's all for the evening, then as usual, you can call or email me with any additional questions, and we will see you next month at 6 o'clock on the 11th. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.